Welcome to Business Owner Tales from the Trenches, the podcast for business owners who want to see around corners and thrive financially. Your host is Carr, CEO and business owner at CornerCap. Tune in every other week for lessons learned from the trenches of entrepreneurship, business successes, and financial independence. Here's Cannon.
Hello and welcome to the show. Cannon Carr and Claudia Bettinger with you. Claudia, this episode today will be an inspiration to any budding entrepreneur of any age, anywhere. If you've only got $500 in your pocket and you've got no third-party capital, you can build a business that tops $1 million in revenue within 10 years. You know, if you have no pre-existing business experience, no problem. If you don't even have a professionally written business plan, no problem. I love the fact that you can be a huge success doing that. Why don't you introduce our guest today?
Absolutely. Today we have Melissa Bunnen Jernigan, who started Piece of Cake, which is an iconic Atlanta brand, which hand makes cakes for any occasion. She founded it with her friend and business partner, Helen, in 1986, which has grown from her kitchen condo to now 10 locations, including the airport. Piece of Cake was recently sold to Chicken Salad Chick, where Melissa stays on as their resident cakespert.
It's a fun story. And incidentally, Melissa's also written a book about it called Piece of Cake. And there's some great stories in there. And you'd learn just about this wonderful business that she built that is iconic, loyal customer base, so much fun to work in, and truly an original creation from her and her partner, Helen. As you listen to today's show, maybe keep three things in mind. The first one is about definition of success. It's so important to know what is important to you as an entrepreneur and to your business. And that definition of success is so crucial because as you grow your business, you will get advice from all over the place, right? And Melissa does such a wonderful job with such courage and conviction of staying true to what's important to her and her business and staying away from the noise. And she'll talk to you about that. And it's such a natural, wonderful process to hear. The second thing is a phrase that she uses, and I just love. It's called, she says, listen to the business. It will tell you what to do. And we'll talk a little bit about that, about how that philosophy really guided her in terms of growth, in terms of choices, and strategic decisions. And it's a wonderful original phrase. And the third thing to listen to is just how, once again, it's so true. Every successful business has an underlying process that's very clear and very well defined. Although if you walked into her store at any time, you'd say, this is chaos, right? and it doesn't look like it's a process at all. But I love it. There is.
Yep. And
we talk about that on the show. So sit back and enjoy this great episode with Melissa Bunnen Jernigan. Well, Melissa, thanks for joining us on the program. I thought we'd go way back to the beginning. You know, in hindsight, you know, when I've talked to you and whatnot, it always seems like you knew you want to be an entrepreneur. Yet at the same time, I think it took a little bit of time for you to figure that out. Tell us a little bit about that. Why was that the case?
Well, I think I graduated from college and took the traditional route and went through a bank management training program.
Yep.
But I do think I had always known that I wanted to start my own business. It just took a little while to figure out when the timing was right and when all the pieces of the puzzle fell together.
That fell together. Well, why did you think you wanted to start a business? Did you have this idea you just wanted independence? You didn't want to have a boss? What did you think starting a business was?
I think part of it was I was always willing to work hard in my other jobs, and I was willing to work as hard as they needed me to work.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking, I want to go to my exercise class, and I just have to sit here and show my face, and until 6 o'clock or something. So
yeah. Fast forward a little bit to the end. I know you worked incredibly hard as an entrepreneur in your own business. Was owning your own business what you thought it would be, just in hindsight?
Well, I mean, maybe even 5 years. I'll get back to that answer. Yeah. But it was always a journey. We were always moving forward. I probably didn't have time enough to stop and think about whether or not I was doing what I wanted to be doing. I just had to keep moving.
Had to keep moving, had to be all in, right? Had to get cakes out the door. Well, going back, how did you and your partner, Helen, settle on delivery and baking of cakes?
Well, we both had worked in offices. I worked at First Atlanta, and she was at a retail department store. And their corporate office, I guess. And so we would meet regularly to figure out what, to get us to figure out what we wanted to do. And to me, like when I worked at the bank, it was always, I liked the parties where we brought in birthday cakes for people. So it really started from baking cakes to bring them in for people's birthdays in the office.
Well, I remember you told me, people love cakes, right? Who says no to a cake? And I think you'd also read somewhere at the time that delivery to homes and businesses was going to be a key trend over the next decade, right? And I think you guys said,
right.
Hey.
I had spent about 6 months, I think, up in New York, and I happened to pick up the Wall Street Journal one day, and my brother, and he's like, only Melissa would pick up the Wall Street Journal one day, and it was talking about how home and business delivery was not just going to be Chinese anymore,
right.
Chinese food. So,
and it changed right. Picking up that journal on that day changed your life, didn't it? It's
right.
Awesome.
About, within probably 2 or 3 years after that, it just always stuck in my head. So we were kind of ahead of the curve on the delivery.
Well, and the other thing I love too, you and Helen had no experience baking cakes, and you had, you never really you hadn't run a business. You weren't delivery experts. Did that bother you?
No, but I thought I had my sign up here. I did take a little class at Emory. It was like one of those evening classes, how to run and manage your own small business.
Sure.
And I was already doing piece of cake, but I got the certificate, so I was proud of that.
Oh, that's great. You could teach the class now, but you guys, it didn't bother you that you had no experience getting into what you were doing. Was it confidence that led you there? You believed in the vision?
Well, I think for one thing, it was the low startup cost. We each put $250 in.
Yeah.
And so, but failing was never an option. I mean, I could never go back to my parents and say, oh, we're closing down the business. And it really sort of took off right away. It was a slow and steady growth. It just was always growing.
When you did launch it, those first 2 years, or really those first 2 Christmases, was really an interesting time because, like you said, each of you put in $250, and I think that was the total amount you put in for years, right? You just grew off of that. That's an incredible, like you said, low cost start. And at the same time, I know you had no marketing budget. And you'd done some research on how to price your cake, but basically your cakes, and you started in your condo apartment with your oven. What were those first 2 years like?
Well, they were fine during the year, and then the holidays would roll around. It was like there was no way we can continue in my condo. So then we had to start looking around to move out of the apartment. It was really hair-raising time for really a stretch and a struggle to, start baking at 5 a.m, then go deliver cakes, start baking again. It was a lot of work. But like I said, we just never came up for air to figure out that maybe we should be hiring somebody to help us. And so bit by bit, we hired people along the way.
Well, I know, and we'll get to that. So I know, but at first it was just the two of you, in your condo apartment. You had, all your flour and ingredients stacked along the walls, right? You had your oven going. I think you found another oven in Goodwill that you could use. I mean, you guys were bootstrapping, and I think you didn't work 9 to 5. I remember you told me you worked 5 to 9,
right?
And then in between those, you would prep the eggs. So I mean, y'all were working around the clock doing this crazy dream, right?
It was a lot of work. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember my mother saying, well, you need to get a computer, because computers were just sort of coming in around that time, I guess, in the mid 80s.
Yeah.
So that you can put your flour and sugar and, all that. And we were, my desk was right here. The ovens were right here, and the ingredients were right there. I was like, I can look right there and see what we have. It wasn't so complicated at the time.
Yeah.
It would have taken a lot more time to put it on the computer.
What was so by that second Christmas, how many cakes do you remember how many cakes you delivered that second?
We got a big order. I think it was maybe 100 cakes, and we were making them one by one at the time. Yeah. I mean, so it was a lot. Yeah. That was just one order was that. And then we had all the other orders that were coming in.
Well, so at that 2-year mark, what was the grand vision for Piece of Cake? I mean, at this fast forward, you built a great business across 10 locations in Atlanta, and ultimately you've sold it now to a larger retail store, retail restaurant chain. But at the time, back when you were in your kitchen, what was your vision for this? Just survival, or did you actually have
Well,
an ambition?
no, I think, in the early days, we wanted to have $1 million business. We thought we would have made it by then, but then that came and went. Yeah.
Well, you mean because you passed it?
Right.
Yeah. So
that was the original goal. Yeah.
The original goal, right? And then you passed it. So, well, when did you realize then you had a viable business? And I realize eventually you hired employees, and I forgot when you hired your first employee, but I don't think it was when you expanded into Howell Mill. Yeah, in your apartment. Okay, so you did.
Yeah.
When did you realize? When did you realize you had a viable business? This was no longer just you two just hoping to hit $1 million.
Well, we had lots of Buckhead kids helping us work, and it was more of a fun party scene than anything. I mean, we would work and get those cakes out, but it was also a lot of fun. And I think I never took anything for granted. I mean, I always felt like, at the end of the day, I had to do. I had to be able to do anything. People might not show up for work. We had all these University of Georgia college kids one Christmas, and then there was a big party in Athens and nobody showed up. And I had to call all the parents, wake up your kid. I need him at work or whatever. So I never wanted to, it took a long time and still even today, I mean, I didn't have the confidence to know, I do now, but to know that, the shoe wasn't going to fall and what are we going to do? So it took a long time to build that up.
Well, so, I mean, because you always seem to have confidence. Like you said, failure was not an option. But yet at the same time, I guess the other side would say, but it could happen at any time. And I've never taken this for granted for the most part, right?
Right. I think I was, very right brain, left brain, all at the same time.
Yeah. Well, I know you added you went into Howell Mill. That was, you eventually moved out of your apartment, I think year 3, and you were at the Howell Mill location where you kind of had your, baking going and where delivery would start. But you added a second location eventually, right? Was that 5 years into it or 10 years? Exact timing doesn't matter, but
maybe it was about, I'm not quite sure how many, 10 years. I don't know, maybe
I think so, give or take.
Years.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure. But one of our employees was this great girl, and she was moving up to Roswell. And so she, was like, what do you think about opening a store in Roswell? Well, okay, we'll give it a try. And then, we'll give another one in Decatur a try. Yeah. So it just sort of.
Well, and what I love, I mean, you've certainly written a book about this, which I've loved, and you and I've chatted about it. There is a method to your madness, right? And you talk about how it's so much. There's so much frenetic activity in your business, and it was fun, but you had a mix of different types of people, and you didn't really have any rules, but yet there was deliberateness underneath, and we'll get to that. But as you expanded and you talked about what took you to Roswell, what took you to Decatur, did you have a philosophy about growth? And by the way, I think you did, right? But what was your philosophy about growth?
I think we just sort of, the Roswell was partly because we had someone who wanted to work up there. And then Decatur, we delivered to Decatur, and there seemed to be a lot of desire for cakes to come to Decatur. And it was far away. Those deliveries were hard. So we thought, why not open a store in Decatur?
Which, put you closer to deliver, be able to have to do
where
delivery.
Customers were. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but I remember back all along, I think you had a phrase, you wanted it to grow in the safest manner possible, right? You didn't ever try to grow too fast. You always tried to have your spending so conservative that you could fund growth pretty easily, right? So you were basically funding growth from the business, just the sale of cakes, right? And real conservative. And so you weren't, your goal wasn't to grow necessarily. I think it was to have fun, deliver great product, and keep generating a cost-effective revenue, right? Right.
But I mean, I remember at one point looking in the bank account, we had $10,000. And I was like, okay, well, we can move out of the apartment now. And because then I was very sure that we were bringing in enough income to pay for what we needed.
Yeah. And that was
And
a pivotal
also, we
moment.
didn't make our moves until we were so, splitting at the seams. It was no turning back. I mean, we just couldn't fit more things in one building before we moved to the next one.
Yeah. Well, and I remember you have a phrase that I love, which is you said you listen to the business will tell you what to do. And I just thought that was beautiful. Tell us a little bit about that. I mean, because I think that was part of your philosophy about growth and about hiring people and about spending. What did it mean to listen to the business?
Well, I think when there was absolutely no way to do what we were doing anymore, I remember if I heard my name called one more time, I was going to lose my mind. So then I realized we needed someone in another position to help do this. And then, we kind of threw a bunch of ideas against the wall and saw what stuck. And at the time, I really wanted to grow our shipping business, but the business was sort of telling us we needed to open more stores around Atlanta first. So that's why we started moving in that direction.
Yeah. Well, and I think in listening to the business too, there was an organic quality. I think one time, not only delivery side, but you started having customers come in to pick up cakes, right? And you were like, hey, we don't do it that way. But rather than say, hey, go away, you guys adapted, right?
Right.
And so is listening to the business also, I mean, you saw your customers doing a certain thing and you started accommodating that.
Right. So they wanted to come pick up because they weren't necessarily going to be home during our delivery hours. And so that worked out fine.
Yeah.
To have them come.
Did you need to build up a showroom though, or are you just like, hey, just pick it up out the back door?
No. We just had a Mr. Ed door at the side of the building, and so they would come up to the door.
Yeah.
And they didn't come in. They couldn't come in.
Yeah. Well, did you ever take on debt as you grew the business, or did you always fund it internally?
Always funded it internally. We took on a little bit of debt when we moved over to Roswell Road, but then it was paid back, 4 years ahead of time. I mean, I was very conservative in that way.
Do you think some people say debt will help you grow faster? Did you ever feel that urge to say, all right, let's grow faster? Or did you say no?
No, because I just didn't feel comfortable knowing that we were going to have all this money to pay. I was always waiting for the shoe to drop. And so I wanted to make sure that we were going to be able to make our payments and that sort of thing. Yes, we probably could have grown a lot faster and been a lot bigger of a business, but it was what felt right to me.
Right. Well, so we've talked a little bit about growth. You've often said you did not have a business plan. And, I think if is it true or false? If someone had walked into your operations, would it feel like chaos, when they walked in, or was it usually pretty quiet in there? What was the environment like?
No, it was frenetic, but it was very organized chaos, like you said earlier. Yeah.
Well, so, right. So you didn't have a formal business plan or rules. And maybe people say, all right, so that seems to create some chaos. I think y'all thrived on that chaos. So how did you tell us a little bit about underneath that? Then you said there was organization. How was it organized? And what I'm moving to ultimately is, I think there was a process you guys had and as long as everyone respected the process, everything worked beautifully, even though it felt like chaos. Could you tell us just a little bit about that? I think it's wonderful.
Well, we used to joke that like a new hire would come in, and they would either gravitate towards the carpet or the tile. And if they gravitated towards the tile, that meant working in the kitchen. And the carpet meant working in the office area. And so they came in, and we just watched where they gravitated towards.
So that they would self-select, right? You'd say, all right.
Yeah.
So what was your criteria for bringing someone into Piece of Cake? Did you have a checklist of here are the 10 things we need to see?
Not much. In those days, we were so happy to have anybody who showed up to work, and we didn't have very organized work hours. People kind of worked when they wanted to work. So that's why I always had to make sure I could get the work done.
Yeah.
Because if everybody left, then I had to make sure I could get the work done.
Yeah. Well, was there in this process of growth that you had, was there ever a moment of doubt, or did you ever hit like a disruption or transition that you were like, oh my gosh, I didn't see that coming, and we've got to navigate around that?
Well, after 6 years in the business, still over in the basement on Hell Mill, Helen announced she was pregnant with her third child, who we started the business together, and that she really needed to leave. And so we had to go through a long, drawn out process of me buying her out when I didn't really want to. I wanted her to stay. And, so that was probably a very emotional time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and did that actually change some things too? Because, I think you and Helen were still the ones basically up to that point who were doing the main part of the work, right? You were basically baking the cakes, you were doing the deliveries, you had people come in and help kind of manage on the edges. At what point, and maybe it's when you had to buy Helen out, at what point did you finally give up doing the work and allow others to do it, and you kind of oversaw the process? Or was that a gradual thing, or did it happen
It was
overnight?
very gradual and very slow. So it was over a long period of time. Yeah.
Why was it hard to let go? Why didn't you do it sooner?
Well, it was hard to let go. I think it was, it was my baby, and I wanted to make sure my baby was doing what my baby was supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
So I think that was part of it.
Well, you had a reputation for incredible, just a great, homemade, high quality cake. The standard was very high, right? Was it, but over time, did you finally find people who could do the work and meet that standard?
Yeah. And it was just a very slow and steady process.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in hindsight, do you wish you had done that sooner, or did you actually, that worked out exactly like it should have?
I mean, I can't look back on that because it just is what it is. I mean, yes, that could have all happened sooner, but I can't look back on that.
Yeah.
And it's been a great fun ride. So
yeah, no, I love it.
And we were working with all our friends, and well, I guess when we moved to the Roswell Road location, we really had to bring in real staff to run the kitchen. And so that was probably another turning point where I could let go of that, because they were trained people. The dessert place had closed down around that time, and a lot of them came over and worked for us.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I know you still have, after 20 years, you still have some of the same people that have been with you on the journey the whole time, right?
There are some people who've been there a long, long time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. No, the loyalty is incredible. Well, so as you talked about, originally I'd asked about what, in those early years, what was the definition of success? How did that evolve over time? Once you realized you had a viable business and you hit the $1 million sales mark, where did you ultimately want Piece of Cake to go?
I mean, I probably never had a real concrete answer for you there, but I always felt like we had to keep moving forward, because I always said, if we're not moving forward, we're moving backwards. So didn't want to stay at status quo. So we always had to keep growing and moving. And so it really wasn't until the pandemic that we just kind of put the brakes on.
And in that pandemic period, which threw so many businesses for a loop, I know you absolutely survived, clearly. What happened at first, and how did you navigate through that
Well, we closed the business down for about 6 weeks, I think. It's the first time in my adult life that I haven't worked. And it was just, I was still working, trying to get the PPP money and all that. But but we kept paying our people. We had, reserve and savings. And so we kept our people on the payroll until the help came in with the government. So
right. So and you were back delivering cakes by, probably what, middle end of the summer
during the pandemic.
Yeah, during the 2020.
Well,
pandemic.
No, we closed down like in April. I think we opened back up in May for Mother's Day. We opened back up.
Oh, good. Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
But we did have another stretch of we'd have to close down periodically, just sick people. So
yeah. But so when we look at the mindset of an entrepreneur and a founder like yourself, there's always this interesting balance between being stubborn about the vision and staying true to the vision, and yet at the same time recognizing, as you listen to the business, as you say, the need to pivot and change. Tell us a little bit about how you might have balanced that, because I know, being stubborn and holding to the vision is so important. And I know you've got incredible tenacity, to get through like you did. Was there ever a time where you did have to pivot and change and say, I'm going to not be as stubborn now because I see a need for the business to change and evolve?
Not really. I mean, we did have to. I mean, during the pandemic was probably our most challenging time of having to sort of change hours of the stores and change kind of the employees, who was working when, that kind of thing. Yeah. But we never sacrificed on quality of the cakes. The expenses have gone way, way up, but we were never willing to cut corners there.
Yeah. What when the expenses went up, was that because that was required to keep the quality going? Because I know you guys even in adding stores, you didn't add like overhead, right? You are always just like, this has got to be an absolute retail connection. We're going to keep overhead centralized to keep costs low. Over time, what did expenses just go up to maintain that quality though? Or tell us about that.
Well, yeah, all the ingredients went way, way up. And,
oh yeah.
And we did go up on the price of the cakes during that time. Our employee costs went up. I mean, but the food costs were just skyrocketing at that time.
Oh yeah, you're talking about the pandemic in particular, or coming out of the pandemic. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Was it hard to pass through increased prices on cakes, or that was pretty easy?
We had no choice. I mean,
yeah.
We went as long as we could. I mean, our profitability went way down, and we just sucked it up, and it still hasn't. The profitability still hasn't come back, but but we're still. I'm making payroll every week, and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
so
it's amazing. Have you hit payroll every time?
Yep.
Yeah, that's an amazing record over 30 years to hit payroll every time. I mean, it really is an accomplishment there. So I know recently this fall, you finally, Piece of Cake was so valuable, someone wanted to acquire it. Did you ultimately see that coming, and if you can just comment a little bit about that, like what brought that transaction about, and how did you, looking back on it, did it end up in a good place for you?
Well, I think over the last number of years, I mean, I've had a lot of changes in my life with kids and aging parents and that sort of thing that was eating up a lot of my time. Not eating up my time. I got to do that. But just, a lot of changes personally. And so, I mean, I was always, keeping my ear out for something to come my way. I mean, over the years, maybe I've had a few periods of time where I was sort of, kind of putting my ear out there, trying to find somebody who would be interested. But this was just the Chicken Salad Chick, Scott Deviney, who is the president. He called me one day. I mean, it wasn't like we had a person out there, trying to find a buyer for us. He just called me one day, and over the next year and a half, the transaction was complete. So they are now the owners of Piece of Cake.
Well, congratulations. But I think all 120 employees will stay on, right? You guys get to basically,
including me.
Yeah, including you, right? So what will be your role going forward?
I'm still sort of identifying it. My title is Cakespert, but
Cakespert. I love that.
We'll see. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that is what you do best is certainly cakes. But at the same time, what I love, just listen to business, being able to manage chaos in a very productive, profitable way. It's actually, like I said, the underlying process that you have is very impressive. And, as I look back over the last 30 years, I mean, was there ever a misstep or something that you were like, oh, that was a bad idea, and you had to unwind it and correct it? Or was it always, did you always hit the stride right?
No, I mean, I was always so careful not to invest too much money into things that might not work out. So I was probably too careful to not make mistakes. But one time we did look at a computer system that was really aimed more for groceries, grocery stores, and that did not work out. And I probably invested some money in that we shouldn't have, but otherwise I was pretty careful. Yeah.
If that's the worst thing that happened, then I would say you nailed it. But you did say something interesting. Maybe did you, when you look back on it, were you too conservative in how you ran the business, or
it worked for me?
It was what it was. Yeah.
I mean, that worked for me. I mean, would I recommend that to somebody else? I mean, everybody's got to find their own path, but that was what felt comfortable to me.
Yeah, no, well, it worked beautifully. So maybe just last question or two, just in that philosophy. I mean, where did you get that kind of that MO to run your business? Was that something? And I know your mom was kind of an inspiration to you. Where did you get that operating philosophy from?
Well, I think my dad was a very sensible man, and he was a doctor, but he also had a really good business sense. And my mother was an artist, and I think between the two of them, I came to that. So
yeah. Well, no, it's wonderful. Well, last question. Just your journey is original and unique, and yet at the same time, there are a lot of principles underneath it. What advice would you give to a new founder today who's starting a company either in the restaurant industry or just in general? After your almost 40 years running this business in both an original way, but also in a very disciplined way, what advice would you give to somebody just getting started?
Well, I guess part of it is once you have it in your head what it is you want to do, and you feel like it's the right thing to do, don't listen to everybody else who's throwing things at you left and right. Well, you really should do this, and you should do this. Be true to yourself.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I know you had many opportunities there. You would get a lot of advice, and you'd have to tune that out, right, to stay authentic to what Piece of Cake was telling you to do.
Right.
Yeah.
There were times, that at some point we started making cupcakes, and, for 15 years, all we did was bake cakes.
Right.
So we did slowly add in other cookies and a few other things.
Yeah. Well, right. I mean, you had for the first couple of years, I think 3 flavors of cakes, and that was it. And then after into year 3, you started expanding. Did eventually you did add cupcakes and did you get into broader desserts, or was that like, that is too much noise, right?
No.
Because I'm sure you got advice to probably do that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
As this man who he was the head of the Retail Bakery Association, and we were just making cakes at the time. He said, you can't run a bakery and just sell cakes. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was the most profitable part of the bakery. I had no idea at the time. Yeah. But I was like, well, watch me now,
So he was like, you got to expand your product line, and you were like, and there's that, you got to be stubborn in a way, right? I know what works, right? You've seen it, and you resisted that and stayed true to what you do.
Right.
Well, Melissa, this has been awesome. Thank you very much. I loved reading your book. I loved hearing your story, just as we chatted, over coffee and here today. It's just such a great original story with so many insights for people who are getting started in their own business. So thanks for being on the podcast with us today.
Well, thanks for having me. It is a little crazy, but yeah.
Yeah, that's great. All right. Well, thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Welcome back to the program. Cannon and Claudia with you. Claudia, that episode captured Melissa's originality and genius, I thought, in a wonderful way. We'll provide our 2 or 3 takeaways, but first, what did you just think about this episode?
I mean, I think it's really incredible that she started this business with $500 total, $250 of her own money.
Yeah.
And then managed to build that and scale that into a 7-figure business within the first 10 years. And she did that by sticking to her guns and staying conservative and doing things how she wanted to do, which just proves, you have to listen to your gut.
Yeah. No, it's awesome. And that's reassuring, isn't it? Right.
I mean,
if you can make those things happen with that start, without business experience, right? I mean, she actually had worked in the corporate world a little bit, but she had not operated a bakery,
right?
And she had not really baked cakes, but they took it to that level, and it's really impressive. So, yeah, I agree with you. I loved hearing that story. Well, I thought the first takeaway we might highlight is just that definition of success, and how for Melissa, what was important to her is what shone through the business, right? Mm-hmm. And she had the courage and conviction to stay with that. And what did you think her definition of success was, do you think?
I mean, I think her definition of success, definitely staying conservative and not taking out debt, but while being fun and energetic and active at her core. She really liked to be original. It sounded like she kind of liked to buck trends and maybe do things differently. And so I think that would definitely be more of her definition of success.
I agree. And she had a real commitment to a standard of excellence, right?
Yeah,
she wanted
absolutely.
to make handmade cakes that meant something to the person who was receiving them, and handmade, hand delivered.
Right.
Hard to scale that, but she knew that, right? And so yeah, but that let her live the authentic style and business that she wanted. That did let her sleep at night, right?
Exactly.
At least that's our impression. I mean, that's really kind of where we saw her defining success. And it was so important because she was so centered on that and understood that so well that she was able to filter out noise. And sometimes not bad advice, right? If you want to grow faster, you can scale the business with broader product set or third-party capital. But she's like, no, that's not authentic to what we want to do. That would change the business the way we've organized it. So other people's definition of success didn't infiltrate her own, right? And it's so hard as an entrepreneur. I mean, all of us feel that, right? If somebody else is doing something better and faster, maybe I should do it that way. Should I be them? No, she stayed true to herself, and it's just awesome. The second interesting point that struck us here was that, and you and I agree with this, there's that unique phrase, listen to the business, it will tell you what to do.
Right.
And it's such a wonderful way, actually, of just capturing that definition of success, the way she had built the business on those values that were important to her. Listening to the business would tell her when and what was the right next step. So, for example, she talked about it. They only made moves when they were splitting at the seams in terms of space, in terms of adding to the team. That basically means, when they were hitting a capacity issue or a problem, that was a decision point in the business. And she would listen to the business and handle it authentic way. And as you pointed out, yes, they stayed internally funded, right?
Right.
And so that initial $500 investment got them started, but they funded the rest of the growth mainly from sale of cakes. And they stayed very profitable, and they didn't grow as rapidly as maybe some others, but they stayed profitable, and they had a conservative balance sheet, and it certainly worked. So that was so interesting about those decision points. I think that quote also kind of highlights how they made their strategic decisions along the way too. So it helped them prioritize things, right? You remember what she talked about on shipping.
Yeah, absolutely. She said, that they had explored shipping, but ultimately they decided that they wanted to expand in Atlanta. And that meant opening up, a little side door for people to come and grab their cakes, went outside of normal delivery hours so that they could continue expanding their customer base.
Yeah.
And I love how she even stuck to her guns with, the side door which she wasn't going to put up a storefront, but still sticking to what she wanted to do.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, saying no to shipping, right? That would have been a different set of economics and added some things. She said, there's better opportunity for us to keep doing what we do well,
right,
and expand further into Atlanta. It went into Roswell, went into Decatur, went down to the airport. Just wonderful there. And yeah, your point about picking up in the store, such a natural extension. Her customers would come in and say, hey, I'm not going to be home when you deliver. Can I just come pick it up?
Yep.
And you're right. They didn't build a big showroom. You remember she said they had a Mr. Ed door?
Yes.
You know who Mr. Ed is?
No.
I think what she was referring to was the old black and white TV show of Mr. Ed when they would talk through Mr. Ed in his stable door, I think. And apologies to Melissa if I misunderstood. But I just thought that was a wonderful example of staying, again, true to the practicality of the business model. And kind of another dimension just of that listen to the business, it will tell you what to do. Even in her own journey, she spent most of the journey as an entrepreneur working in the business.
Right.
But she gradually released the control to others. When they expanded into Roswell, I love the story about that dessert store went out of business, and all the kitchen workers came over and they knew how to run a kitchen. She let them do it. And even at the time, I think when it was time for her to maybe change her role in the business, and they ended up selling, I think, to a friend of hers in November, she had been focusing on family and other things that were equally important. Right. And, a sale allowed her to stay in the game as chief, cake expert?
Cakespert.
Yeah, I love that. And then, but yet others, professionally managing from there. So just wonderful there. And I thought the final thing just to highlight here in this episode is just how every successful business has a clear process. And Piece of Cake was no different. If you walked in the store, it looked like absolute chaos, but it was actually organized underneath.
Right, absolutely. She talks about people gravitating to kitchen or carpet and kitchen being that production side, and the carpet being more back office, and people kind of self-selected, and she said it was crazy how employees kind of naturally would choose one over the other.
Yeah, it showed. I mean, employees respected the process,
Right.
whether or not she articulated what it was, whether it was written on the door or the wall, didn't matter. No manual, but clearly there's a process. People
Right.
self-selected, and if you didn't fit, you would not stay in the business either. And it was that's a wonderful example. And I love about the process too. I mean, they followed a deliberate process on the product too. I mean, they did 3 flavors for the first 3 years, roughly, right? And they stayed only focused on cakes for the first 15, and they gradually expanded after that, but it all stayed centered on that core,
right?
That they could do. So just wonderful process underneath that really delivered this business to customers. So, well, we could go on. This just had so much great originality to it. We thank Melissa for being on this program, and we look forward to seeing everyone on the next one.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Are you looking for more resources to help your business? Visit cornercappodcast.com for our free ebooks to help you plan for inevitable transitions in your business. Tune back in every other week for a new episode.